we got Dr. Shawn Baker with us. And Shawn, if you don't mind, just give us a little introduction while I get Richard into the studio. Just tell us a bit about you, what you do, why you're carnivore.
Yeah, sure. So, my name's Dr. Shawn Baker. I've been doing a carnivore diet now for 7 years. I'm actually the person that came with the name carnivore for this particular style of eating. Not that I'm the first person to eat an all-meat diet, but I wrote the book Carnivore Diet. So that name, for whatever reason, has stuck. There's people calling it zero carb and other things over the years, but I'm an orthopedic surgeon by background. I kind of came to an interest in nutrition through my own health. I'm now 56. When I was early mid 40s, I started to see a pretty significant, I was aging, just feeling the age, and even though the fact I was still training very hard as an athlete, was developing, probably metabolic disease and some of these other things. And so I started a nutritional journey, which led me from everything from a low fat, lots of vegetables, lean protein diet to, everything in between, until I eventually, back in 2016, started playing with this all meat diet. And, kind of the rest is kind of history with regard to that. Now, I, have subsequently gone on to, obviously I'm a big advocate of this, as an intervention, lifestyle for some, but certainly as an intervention for treating disease. We've gone on to form a company called Revero, which, we will be, we're just in the very cusp of launching, to start seeing patients throughout the United States, all 50 states, to sort of, treat disease with lifestyle nutrition, which is how we should be doing it all along, instead of going to this sick care model of just putting Band-Aids on symptoms and putting everybody on drugs. We're going to be focused more on, just doing what I think we should be doing. So I see there's your partner, Richard. Richard, hello, how are you?
Hey there, Shawn. How are we doing? You okay?
I seem to be doing okay. I'm not 10 hours in like you guys are, so so I'm still pretty fresh. So.
Easy work for us carnivores, isn't it?
There you go. That's right. There you go.
I'm going to just plug Richard for your show, Shawn, because his story is awesome. I mean, 107 pounds lost. I mean, this guy is the epitome of. Oh, Richard, you know your story. You tell me your story.
Oh my goodness, I think everybody is probably sick of hearing my story by now today. But
a little short version for Shawn.
The short version, the 45-second version, is it? Okay. So I used to be type 2 diabetic. I was clinically obese, suffered with daily debilitating migraines, would make me blind, chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, arthritic pains. In my mid to late 20s, I could barely walk up the stairs without stopping or being severely out of breath. Super long story short, changed my diet. Within a year, I'd lost 107 pounds, reversed diabetes. I was migraine-free, depression, anxiety-free, full of energy. 4 to 5 years later, I went on to become British and European champion at a pro level in men's physique bodybuilding. So I went from being unable to walk up my stairs to being #1 in Europe at a professional level through living a ketogenic carnivore type lifestyle. That's the short version. How was that for short?
That's amazing. Good for you. That's awesome. And I'm not surprised. I mean, I hear stories very similar with massive weight loss, and good for you to keep pushing it to the next level, because it's amazing how much more life you can get into your life. I mean, a lot of people are just walking around like zombies. I mean, they're just like, they're not even alive. I mean, my way. I mean, they're just kind of reanimated corpses, and they're just, because they're just addicted to all this horrible, highly processed, garbage. It's literally, Stephen was there. I met, Stephen and I met for the first time in the UK back in May, and I was at part of the Public Health Collaborative, or Physicians Health Public Health Collaborative. I don't know what the P stands for, but anyway, they're in Sheffield, and Public Health, Sheffield. And I saw a lot of great things, but one thing that struck me out was one of the physicians out there mentioned that all these highly ultra processed foods that we eat are not really food, they're recreational drugs. And I think that is such a good way to think about this. This stuff is literally a recreational drug. You use it at your own discretion, like you would use any other drug, hopefully minimally to none. But that's the deal, man. It's so important. So anyway, what are we chatting about today? Anyway, guys, are a particular topic?
Well,
shooting the breeze.
a 24-hour conversation about carnivore.
Yeah.
Snuck in a little bit of keto.
Yeah. So who was just on before me? I want to know who I'm following.
Well, let me get my notepad.
You don't remember?
Yeah,
so
we had
just had
we had 3 hours.
Oh yeah, the Unwins. Oh nice. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I spent a couple of days with Dave, and Dave and I walked. He took me hiking, had me appreciating the local flora. It was like, hey, you need to up your flower knowledge. And I said, okay, whatever, Dave. So, and it's kind of funny. I've got this stupid little app now on my phone. It's actually not stupid. Actually, it's called Picture This. And you just take a picture of a plant and it'll tell you exactly what it is. So now I walk around my house and I live kind of in the woods and I'm like, what the hell is this thing? I'm learning. So I know everything around me now. It's kind of crazy, but I'm going to see those guys actually next month. We're going to both be in Greece together. We're doing a little carnivore retreat down there in Marathon, Greece. Roberta Capsulis and her husband Apollo are putting that on. I met with them last year in Bosnia. So looking forward to that. Yeah, the Unwins are great people. David's wonderful, and so is Jen. They're both just super lovely and great advocates of low carb. And I think Jen pretty much is full carnivore, if I'm not mistaken. So she's, because she's used that to recover from, food addiction. So anyway, so good people.
Yeah.
They're tough to follow. So they're really good.
Well, you've had 10 hours of, we had Anthony Chafee, Dr. Kiltz, Phil Scott, Ben Hunt, Dr. Rachel Brown, Coach Emily, Sabrina Salt, Coach Bronson, Dr. Sarah Zaldivar, and then we had Dr. Jen Unwin, and we've got lots of people coming up afterwards as well. Kevin Stock, Judy Cho, Keto Savage, so Bart K. So it's a 24-hour sort of trying to get very different guests on, get the word out there.
We should have a couple of vegans on then just to kind of for another perspective. Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard. There's one or two I believe I haven't heard of, but I mean, most of the people obviously I've interacted with almost all those folks, and they're all good people. I mean, we got some good eggs in the carnivore community, I would say, for the most part. I mean, it's been pretty good.
Yeah, I think there was a nice comment here actually. Let's have a look. There was basically someone saying how are Richard and I doing after 10 hours. So I don't know. How are you doing, Rich, after 10 hours?
Yeah, I'm as fresh as a daisy. I'm feeling good. Last night I didn't sleep. I was so excited, like a little child looking forward to this. I think it was probably 4 a.m. that I managed to fall asleep, and then I was up at 7. So I've come into this with 3 hours sleep. We're hitting this for 24 hours, and there's no bed for me straight after. I've got to go straight to work. Obviously self-employed in the keto carnivore space. So I've got a full day of it tomorrow as well. So there's so I'll be up for 2 days by the looks of it. So far so good. I think we've plugged this for 24 hours. And we were concerned that we were going to struggle with content, and it's been quite the opposite, isn't it? I think we've almost having to hush the guests off quickly for the next one to come on while we're in mid-flow with conversation, because the conversation is just flowing, the knowledge is coming, and everybody has brought something to the party so far. And what an incredible way to carry on with part 2 with one of the legends within the carnivore community, and in the likes of Dr. Shawn Baker. So absolute pleasure to have Shawn Baker on board. And how couldn't you be super energetic and pumped up with, there we are, fantastic. So yeah, in answer to your question, I'm good and ready to go and super excited to carry on with the next 14 hours.
Good for you guys. Yeah. Better you guys than me. I mean, I've done my share of, 24-hour, 30-hour, 40-hour shifts in my life. But there's a lot of folks in here making comments. So good. Looks like it's well attended. So it looks like we'll get some good information. It's interesting that this movement is growing. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you saw there was an article published. I can't remember. Maybe it might have been the Telegraph. I think it might have been one of the UK things. The rise of the carnivore, and we're seeing. It is just happening, there's Cammy's talking about being a vegan. It's kind of funny. A lot of people make that exact comment. They thought I was a nut job. Hey, who's this crazy dude on there just realized on Rogan's podcast, and they thought I was totally crazy. And, I didn't go on that podcast with any sort of agenda. Joe just asked me to come on, and I didn't even know how popular he was at the time. Because I never really listened to the guy. And obviously it turns out he's quite popular, but, you know, I was just like, hey, just shooting a breeze type of thing. And, you know, then of course, all of a sudden, you know, you get all the very polarized, you know, sort of thing. Most people thought I was nutty. I mean, at that time, most people thought I was nutty, and probably still most people think I'm nutty, but there's more people that don't now that have done this. And so it's, you know, I'm just looking at some of these comments from Romania, from Chris, 3 flights of stairs a day, 416 days. And I see, you know, one thing that's been really fun to see, you know, on social media is there's been just a number of really, really big people, like big, enormously overweight. You know, we're talking 400 pounds, you know, 200 kilos, whatever, how many stone that is, you know, 30 stone or whatever that is, you know, something like that. People that are just losing hundreds of pounds on carnivore. It's really, really cool to see, instead of going in to get their stomach scrambled up, you know, these gastric bypasses where they permanently alter our, you know, both our anatomy and our physiology, or, you know, taking all the drugs that are out there now. I mean, we've got this real push for drug management for everything. You know, it's just kind of funny. I was just seeing, you know, how bad it's gotten is, you know, there's people saying obesity has nothing to do with the diet or lifestyle. You know, you got, what is it? Dr. Tamika Stanford out of Harvard University telling people, well, it doesn't matter if you exercise or eat. Doesn't matter. If you're obese, you're going to be obese the rest of your life. And the only thing you can do about it is get on drugs, which to me is just a bad thing. And then we got guys like Dr. Muhammad Ali.
I think Shawn's frozen, actually. Oh, no, he was back.
There we go.
You froze for a bit.
Yeah, I saw that. Everything kind of went to the black screen and the circles. Yeah, like Dr. Muhammad Ali is out there talking about, you know, we should have the same level of LDL cholesterol that an infant has. And an infant's level are, you know, like 20% of what an adult is. And no adult human can have that. I mean, it just doesn't exist in nature. So the only way to get there is by taking, you know, lots of drugs. And I mean, that's sort of the thing. It's like, well, you know, we can lower your cholesterol so low that you're the same as a baby. Well, there's a lot of things that are different between a baby and an adult. I mean, a baby has a quarter of the brain mass than an adult has. So does that have an impact? A baby's heart rate is 150. Do we need to have a heart rate of 150? I mean, there's all kinds of differences between babies and adults, and yet there's people advocating that we want baby physiology. And then there's, you know, that concept of, you know, if we're going to lower our cholesterol, they say, well, if you lower your cholesterol so low, you can't get heart disease. But I make the analogy, if you cut off your genitals, well, you can't get a sexually transmitted disease then, most likely. So, you know, it's like, well, you know, I mean, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, sure. If you cut your heart out, you're not getting heart disease either. I mean, it's kind of one of those, it's kind of those silly things, you know. If you take your kidney, you know, what can you live without? You cut your arm off, you won't get arthritis in your arm, right? Okay. Kind of stupid.
Well, I used to use my personality to stop me having sex, but we've got a fair few people just doing nice comments, no actual questions. I would have to agree with Adam here. He's written something. It's not going to be a fan half hour, Shawn, but you know, I don't think there's a carnivore that's not a little bit inspired by you. And I mean, I'm going to put my hand up and say, you know, you definitely inspired me, and it was the Joe Rogan podcast without a shadow of a doubt. And the thing is, I've got lots of clients coming in, and one of my questions is, what influencer did you see? What did you see that made you want to be carnivore? So I think that one podcast, I mean, I would attribute about 200 people that I've dealt with that one podcast. So I think you coming on here and everyone else coming on is just spreading that word. And you were saying about people having a huge amount of weight loss. I mean, the guy I spoke to yesterday who said dirty carnivore, non-alcoholic fatty liver went, type 2 diabetes went. He'd lost his job because he couldn't move, and he lost 245 pounds, got his job back, kept his wife, kept his kids on board because they were just, he actually said, I was just isolated. I was like a zombie. I was like a zombie. And he went carnivore and had loads of pushback, actually, not from his family, but from everyone else. And now he's a huge example. Well, that life, and that's not just him, that's his wife, that's his kids. And then he said, all my family now are all doing this. And they're all losing weight and all feeling better. So I just want to thank you for that as well, and on all the clients' behalf as well, because without that podcast, I don't know what would have happened, because it seemed to have been a springboard. Do you feel that was a game changer? Sorry to use the pun on that terrible film, but do you think it was a game changer for the carnivore community?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, like I said, credit to Rogan and his audience. But I mean, then I think Michaela Peterson then saw that video, and that sort of in part inspired her. And then, of course, her dad did it. And of course, he's got a huge audience. And so that's, this is sort of the catalyst. And now, it's just grown. I mean, there's how many social media channels are there people talking about? There's carnivore this guy, carnivore that guy, carnivore this gal, everywhere. It's like I said, it's interesting how if it were 20 years earlier and we didn't have the social media internet presence that we have today, it probably would have gone very small. I mean, it wouldn't be where it is today, because it's so much easier to share information and share results. And so I think it's just the right time, right place. Because like I said, I am by no means the first guy to talk about an all meat diet. Now, I named it the carnivore diet, but I never, I mean, you can go back to, even the 1700s. Dr. Rollo, James Rollo, Scottish surgeon, 1798, was treating diabetics with carnivore diets. I mean, with all meat diets back then. So I mean, that's in the literature. I mean, there's James Salisbury, U.S. physician, Blake Donaldson, E.B. Newbold, all these docs, even Atkins to some degree, have all sort of been advocates of this way, but it has never taken off to the extent it has now. And I just think there's no way it's not going to continue to grow, just because it just works. I mean, it just works. And I think, again, there's a confluence of events. I think a lot of people are frustrated with the healthcare system in general and the information they're getting. We went through a pandemic where a lot of people disagree with how it was managed. I mean, there's a lot of people that are just like, I don't trust you guys anymore. And I think for good reason. I mean, I think, if you look at the history of some of these, particularly pharmaceutical companies, I mean, they've been convicted over and over again of serial fraud. I mean, like criminal activity, quite honestly. And just keep going. And it's like, wait, are you going to continue to trust these guys? So, I mean, of course there's good with bad, but I mean, there's sort of, that stuff going on for sure.
I mean, I've got a few questions, Shawn, if you're okay. Just some simple ones.
Sure.
The Mystic Warg, I don't know what that means. Anyway, they've put that they're working on possible adrenal issues. Are there any studies, or do you guys have, on the effect of carnivore on the function of the adrenals? And obviously, Rich, you can chime in as well.
Sure. I mean, there's no studies on that. I mean, again, there are very few studies on the carnivore diet. I can probably tell you. I mean, in modern times, in the last 5 to 10 years, there's about a dozen studies that have been done. None have been looked at, adrenal issues. And when you say adrenal issues, that's pretty broad. I mean, obviously, what do our adrenal glands sit on top? They sit on top of our kidneys, and they pump out, various different hormones, adrenaline, it comes from adrenal. I mean, that's one of the ones, norepinephrine. There's an impact on cortisol, obviously, and some of the other things in there. And so depending on, what the issue is, I mean, I've seen people talking about hypercortisolism, one of the critics I've seen recently, these people, the sugar people, the Ray P people, saying, well, you need to eat sugar. Sugars are preferred fuel, and you need to do that to prevent, stress on the body and therefore hypercortisolism. And they'll say that, being low carb stimulates cortisol, and this is going to cause, issues down the road. And this may have, an impact on the adrenal glands. The reality is that, I don't know if you have her on this program, Amber O'Hearn, who I find is just a wonderfully intelligent, bright person who's looking. She's been doing, a zero carb diet or a carnivore diet now for I think she's close to 15 years, and has really, I think, a really bright person. Everybody should check her out and follow some of the stuff she does. But she's talked about, and showing the data on that. And, basically when our glucose starts to get a little low, which often is the case on a zero carb diet. I mean, our glucose tends to run lower for many people. We usually correct that with typically glucagon. That's what's happening. It's not until really, really late into like profound hypoglycemia, you're sweating and you're getting these really true hypoglycemics, that cortisol even comes into play. So it's not really an issue. I mean, it's, it can be. I mean, if you drive somebody's glucose down so low, then cortisol will dump and you'll have this sort of late phase response, but that's usually what's not happening. So, but, without a specific question, adrenal issues is kind of a vague thing there. I would say that, my pat answer for this is just good nutrition generally helps everything. I don't care if it's cancer. I don't care if it's some weird genetic disease. Good nutrition tends to help. So I suspect, again, without knowing exactly what the issue is, carnivore potentially could help. Now, there may be some nuances and you may have to shift things a little bit. I mean, there's different ways to approach to this diet. Although, the easiest way is just eat meat to your full. Eat fatty meat to your full and you're done. I mean, that advice works for a lot of people, for probably the majority of people. But, some people have to, have to make some further adjustments there. Do you want me? I see this question about where I hope to see Revero in the future. Is that something I should answer, or do you?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously where I want Revero to go in the future. I mean, my goal is it will be a significant alternative to the standard allopathic medicine. I think hopefully it will be a huge company where we treat millions of people, hopefully even worldwide. I mean, I think there's no reason we can't expand internationally. I mean, for the first couple of years, it's going to be obviously US based. And I hope we can treat pretty much all conditions, all types of people. And we have literally thousands of physicians working for us. I mean, that's what I want to see. And the reason is, because if we're able to do that, we will, number one, have taken care of literally millions of people, which I think we need. I mean, we are desperately in need of a healthy population. I mean, you can see, it's just anytime you go out to the grocery store, to wherever you go where people gather, you just see so much sickness and illness there. And it is taking an effect on the national psyche in the US and the UK. People are just unhappy. We got something like 1 in 4 people are now on some sort of, mental health drug. And that's not right. I mean, that is just clearly not right. And then we see kids that are starting out with this, little kids, 12-year-old, 13-year-old kids that want to kill themselves, or obese, or pre-diabetic or diabetic. That we can't sustain that. And so we have to do something to change this. And I think it's, again, this is largely a grassroots movement. We do have, within our country, we do have a little bit of
It's a bit choppy, Rich, isn't it? The signal there.
Yeah,
the signal is in.
I was going to say, but at the same time, this is very much a grassroots movement, and I think this is what we're all doing. None of us are, just fabulously resourced. We're all just little guys trying to, just make a difference.
Yeah, it's good. Rich, do you want to read this one out?
Yeah. Why have you asked me to read this one? So from Karsten Bornman, I have Hashimoto's and bad chronic fatigue, been ruminant carnivore for 11 months and progress in mood and confidence, but still not well. Does some healing take longer, I'm guessing? So what are your thoughts on that, Shawn? Is there anything that he needs to alter? Or is it just a case of
maybe.
time?
Certainly. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know. With most hypothyroidism is due to Hashimoto's, and obviously the impacts that we have. Hypothyroidism, fatigue goes hand in hand. Slow metabolism, sluggishness. Skin issues, cold intolerance, all those types of things. And so, you're seeing some progress here. Again, Does carnivore cure every single thing out there? Probably not. Can it impact positively most things? Yes. Without knowing sort of more of your history, Karsten, I would look at, all these other things that go into health, because it's not just diet. Diet, in my view, is one of the most important factors, but there's how's your sleep? How's your activity? Are you intentionally not being sedentary? Are you getting some regular exercise? Are you, there's circadian biology has some level of that. Sometimes people find that ruminant carnivore, I think, is a good thing. I mean, that's, kind of, beef and water for the most part. Those types of things. I think with autoimmune diseases, a lot of people have to be very, very strict for a period of time. And so it could be, you can't have eggs, you can't have dairy, you have to be very mindful about what you do. And then playing with the fat to protein ratio. This is one of those things where I said, just eat fatty meat works for a lot of people, but some people have to be more intentional with how much fat they eat relative to protein. And a lot of times, sometimes the fat percentage has to be a little higher for most people, for most things. Sometimes it has to be a little lower. So I would say, are you assessing, with Hashimoto's, there's usually thyroid antibodies that you can look at, and you can see if those things are progressing, and just assess it and see if that's going on there. But a lot of times with fatigue, one of the problems a lot of people get into with carnivore is they tend to undereat, particularly people that have weight to lose. They come into this, well, I need to lose 30 pounds, 2 stone or whatever, and I'm trying to keep it in your UK terms there. And so they come in and they just kind of like, well, I'm just going to restrict. I'm going to restrict a little bit. And sometimes that's an issue. Sometimes we need to eat more. So I don't know. Without more context, it's hard to say for sure. But yes, some things can take a while. The good news is a lot of people on carnivore will say they continue to heal or get healthier several years into it. And some of the reasons that we may see that, we know things like some of these crappy food products, get incorporated into our tissues, into our fat, into our cell membranes, and the half-lives can be long. It can be, a couple of years. So sometimes, like some people talk about some of these oxidized fats, these sort of, industrial oils that get incorporated into our tissues can take several years to, if their half-life is 2 years, well, by 2 years you have 50%, by 4 years you have 25%, so on and so forth. And so sometimes you can, maybe you can facilitate that through exercise, sweating, I don't know. I mean, things, losing weight, those things might be helpful.
That's brilliant, Shawn. Your half an hour is not enough. Someone's just asked me a question. Have I been standing for the last 10 hours? Yes. And you might remember when I was at MeatRx, I always stood for the meetings, and
yeah, me too.
You stand all the time. Richard's there sitting on his brain. So yeah,
he's working out too hard. That's why.
My bum is hurting. No.
How do you feel? Where's it gone? There's a lot of support in the chat for people that are suffering. Do you feel like the carnivore community is the most sort of supportive community you've dealt with and worked in?
Well, I can't say I've got a lot of different community. Online communities, I don't really have much to compare it to. This is mostly what I've done in online. There is, what I will say is the community is a very important part of many people's healing journey or health journey, or because even today, even though this movement is growing, like I'd mentioned, you're still going to be in the minority. If you go out to a public gathering, family dinner or something like that, you're going to be the only dude or only woman doing carnivore, right? So a lot of times you don't get support. And one of the things I did, when I did a survey on 12,000 of us doing carnivore, one of the things I found was that that support was very important for making an outcome, whether it's friends and family or physician support. If you don't have support there, your outcomes are less likely to be good. It looks like you've got your composition consultant here.
Yep.
What's good, guys?
Good to see you.
A lot of muscle here.
Yeah, good to see you guys.
So I
great.
wonder what's been happening, Shawn, is passing the baton from one guest to another.
Yeah.
So I've been sort of overlapping so we can get you to give us a little bit of what you think about iodine, and then we'll say goodbye to you, and then we'll hand over to Jonathan and see what his take is.
Yeah, I mean, iodine, obviously iodine is important. And yes, it's, where does, we talk about T3, T4, where do those numbers come from? Well, T has 4 iodine molecules, T3 has 3 iodine molecules. So iodine, yes, is necessary for proper thyroid function. Does it make sense to supplement it if you're hypothyroid, if you're having some issues? Potentially. I mean, I think it can be potentially good. I mean, just remember that, there is iodine in meat. It's about 15 micrograms per 100 grams. So, if you eat enough meat, you're going to probably get close to the amount you need. Now, the other thing is, I would argue that many of us become thyroid sensitive, just like we become insulin sensitive. You can become thyroid sensitive, so you might need a little less thyroid hormone circulating. I think that's a real phenomenon. But even still, if you are profoundly thyroid deficient, maybe for a period of time, some iodine can be helpful. That's I guess I'll leave it with that and let you guys get on to your next guest. Thank you for having me, by the way. This has been fun. Yeah.
Did the two guys, did Rich and Jonathan, do you want to have a quick chat with Shawn before he goes? Do you want to say anything?
Yeah. I'll just say hi to Shawn. It's nice to see you. You look
good
huge as ever.
Well, it was good meeting you. We got to meet in the same event that Stephen and I met at the thing in Sheffield. So good to see you again. Hopefully you're doing well and life is treating you good. And I know I think you're prepping for a bodybuilding contest in the near future. So good luck with that.
Thank you. Yeah, but just over a year away now, maybe 16 months or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Brilliant stuff. Yeah, I mean, all I'd like to say is just thank you, Shawn, for coming on board. 30 minutes is definitely not long enough. I think we've experienced similar with all the guests of me. We had Dr. Chafee on for 3 hours, and we still had questions and things to discuss there. But to be concluded, I think there's lots that we can hit home and maybe put forward to you again. But thanks for your time. Very much appreciated.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for the audience. Thanks for being part of this community. All of us are important. Every single one of us is important. And in order to grow this, we all need to sort of just continue to fight the good fight. So thanks everybody for being there. I'll leave you to it. Have fun. Stay awake for the next 14 hours, guys. Take care.
Easy work. Thank you, Shawn. Well appreciated.
So, Jonathan, for those that don't know you, can we have a little introduction from you?
I'll give you a whistle-stop tour. Firstly, thanks very much to both of you for hosting this. Appreciate it takes a lot of time and effort to put this all together. It's not just the click the button and go. It's a case of getting everything organised. So I do appreciate that very much. I'm sure everyone else does as well. I'll be as succinct as possible. I'll just say I'm a 28-year-old carnivore bodybuilder. Been following the diet since February the 2nd, 2020. So it's roughly 3.5 or so years. I first experimented with the diet when I was I believe I was 14 or 15, maybe 16 years old. I did a diet of tuna and eggs for a bodybuilding competition for 5 months. Didn't really work. I didn't have enough saturated fat, not enough cholesterol. Came back to it a few years later. I noticed at that time I had some positive effects on my digestion. I tried it again. I noticed when I had vegetables and fruits and things, I felt more inflamed, felt worse. So I got rid of those back in February 2020. And I actually used it partially to help diagnose the issue that I have in my spine. I have something called spondylitic spondylolisthesis in the L5-S1 vertebrae. That means I've got trapped nerves in my spine, which causes me a real pain in the backside. And up until then, it just caused me that. Now it causes me pain in the hip as well. I had a spinal fusion surgery in December the 12th last year. So I'm roughly 7 months post spinal fusion. I have found actually the diet has got my inflammatory markers as close to zero as they can possibly get. So it's been very effective in that kind of regard. And with that being said, I'm kind of looking at the diet now from a multifaceted approach. So the fact that I suffer with autistic spectrum disorder, I've noticed my cognition is far better, my ability to communicate is far better, my sensory kind of input isn't as frustrating to deal with. I suffer with something called synesthesia. So oftentimes I'll experience senses as I speak or do anything. It can be quite frustrating, but it does make life quite a hell of a journey. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Other than that, I'm a nutrition consultant. I specialise mostly on the carnivore diet. I work with bodybuilders and average folk, just as I'm sure both of you guys do. I tend to go more towards the body composition side of it, so I'm kind of at that funnel after when people have got healthy. Okay, now I want to build my muscle, lose fat. That's where I'm at basically right now.
And do you know Rich?
I have not met Rich, but I believe I may have crossed him at the PHC UK.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? Because I mean, we're such a small community, within the UK. Yet there's so many people that I haven't met or heard of either. But we've got to fix that. I think, haven't we? I think events like this will allow us to network. Because I come from a bodybuilding background also. It took over my life for a number of years. I've come away from it now. As you can tell, I'm considerably smaller. But same as you, adopting the lifestyle, removing the plant toxins, phytoalexins allowed me to thrive in a sport that is heavily carb dominated. At the time, I was one of only 2 or 3 low carb ketogenic athletes. And I remember time with the British Championship. I won the British Championship in my category, and a gentleman who won in his, a friend of mine, is also ketogenic. The guy that came second to him was also, so the 3 ketogenic people at the time came first, second, and third, and obviously 2 of them were in one category. But we were ostracized from the community because he was so heavily carb dominated that I was the weirdo in the corner that didn't consume carbohydrate. But it soon started to turn heads. When you turn up year after year, you become leaner and bigger, and you're gaining more mass than anyone else, and your conditions coming on point, and you start winning comps. It does start to turn heads. Fantastic, and kudos to you. I think this is the ideal lifestyle for tackling and blocking NLRP3 inflammasome, which is responsible for a lot of the inflammatory signaling within the body. I don't suffer a severe with you in regards to inflammation, but I have always had inflammatory problems which are barely non-existent anymore. And for me, it's been absolutely life-changing, and it sounds like it's been life-changing for you so far as well. So kudos to you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad you've had success with it as well. It sounds like, I'm sure you guys talked about this loads of times already now. It's been like 10 hours in nearly. You need carbs to build muscle. You need carbs to train. Obviously not. Yeah. I'm 110 kilos. I'm really, really, really strong. I'm really, really, really fast. I'm quite muscular as well. So I kind of shine like Shawn, like yourself. I'm sure quite a few others that you don't need carbs to build muscle.
No,
you don't.
No carbs.
And I think we've got some questions for you, Jonathan, if that's okay. And obviously, I'd like Rich to chime in as well. Sure. I think he was a bit starstruck with Shawn there. I've never seen him so quiet. But anyway,
I didn't get a chance to get anything in. I think it was so short, and I didn't. Obviously, there was a few people who had paid, isn't it, to ask a few questions. Yeah. I didn't want to take up the time. I was ready to jump in anyway, to be honest, but I didn't want to take up the questions. But you know me, give me the mic for 2 minutes, and I'll take it for 2 hours. So.
I think what happened when I was trying to organise this was I didn't know who we'd get. I'm going to be really honest here, and Anthony Chafee was so generous because he was the first person. Well, you arranged that, Rich, and he said, "Oh, I'll do the first 3 hours." So I just assumed, maybe if we do that, we're not going to get enough guests. So I reduced the time down to sort of like a maximum of an hour, and I got so many people wanting to do it. In the end, it was all we could do was half an hour. So Shawn was the last one in. So we only had half an hour, and he's one of the biggest names in carnivore. So anyway, right, here we go. So Sonny's asked, hi, if I'm not counting calories, how do I calculate percentages?
That's an excellent question. Anyone that's worth their weight, I'd say, is not counting calories. It's a very outdated concept. I won't go into here. I'm sure you guys have tons of videos. I do as well. Percentages now, they can be a useful guide. The way you'd work that out is work out how many, percentages, ratios can be used interchangeably. I believe it's something like 80-20 in regards to fat to protein if you're doing something like, say, 200 fat, 100 protein. That's how you'd work it out. Basically 2 to 1, that would be 80-20. And then from there, you'd know, would it be about 60-40 would be something like 1 to 1, or 66-33 it would be 1 to 1, something like that. I'm personally not the biggest advocate of percentages, ratios, calories. As you guys have said, actually, I was listening to you guys earlier, you do have a protein and an individual fat requirement. I'm sure you've probably said it, and I'm sure Dr. Chafee said at the very start. You're not looking at these things as some kind of mix match thing. The amount you need for each specific nutrient is very individual. I've spoken to some carnivores that are having as much as maybe 90% fat if you're talking about calories. And there's people as low as maybe 30% fat. But people are doing 30% though, they're doing it for a short phase to drop body fat very quickly, so protein sparing modified fast. What I'm finding with several hundred people I've spoken to over the past, 7, 8, 9 months I've been carnivore coaching, so to speak, is people tend to fall around a 1 to 1 ratio of protein to fat. Especially at the start when they're less fat adapted, they're not taking as much fat in a given period of time. So what I'm looking at for most people is find your protein grams. I know you guys have pretty similar views to me. I literally listened to a bit with Coach Bronson earlier. I believe he said 1 to 1.25 grams per pound of lean body mass. My recommendation is 1.75 grams per kilo of fat-free mass. The reason why I use fat-free mass is fat-free mass that does alter. That would include your bone itself. Your bone is an adaptive material in the body, so that can go up and down. So I think, although yes, you can use your lean body mass, I mean, why not include bone as well? That's an adaptive substance itself in your body. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand with it. And I think the variation between that in terms of maybe it could be maybe 10 to 15% either side. So some people might be doing maybe 1.5, some people might be doing about 2, something like that. So for myself, as a point of reference, I don't stick to that myself. The reason being is I have a large fat-free mass. I've tried doing 1.75 grams, but I notice my appetite goes up for more. If I go for a walk, it goes up even higher. If I do anything in my day, it'll go up even further and further and further. So that's why I'm giving a large bracket for a lot of people. Then from there, once you found that protein grammage, you'll look at your fat grams. So you might start at that 1 to 1. So for example, someone on maybe 120 protein might be on 120 fat. What you then look at is, I mean, there's a few things you can look at. Subjective markers like your sleep quality, your recovery from gym if you go to the gym and exercise, your scale weight, your digestion, anything you can kind of give a rough estimate on. So you might give yourself a score on day 1. How do you feel on day 1? Then from there you'd go to say day 2, day 3, day 4. Give each marker a score out of 10. And you can say, okay, that macro ratio, that grammage didn't work. It did work. From there, you then up or minus protein or fat grams. You can sometimes up them at the same time and sometimes lower them at the same time. You'll notice this if you drop too much weight or gain too much weight at a given period of time. That's kind of where I stand on ratios and macros. They can be useful tools at the beginning, but for me, that's my summary of macros, what to do, how to start, and where I'd go from there. Of course, follow your appetite as well.
Well, Rich, I thought you were going to unmute there. Did you want to add to that?
I am. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It's I think, you know, doing it that way is probably more. That's how I began measuring early on, was you know, the fat-free mass, but it is more difficult to measure, and that's why I tend to round it. So I believe, I mean, we 1.75 per kilogram is about 0.8 for fat-free mass, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, that's probably in the same ballpark as 1 gram per pound, more or less, give or take, I think. Would you agree, more or less?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
So as a ballpark figure, and again, as you say, everyone is individual, and it's a case of finding that, you know, putting that fork in the ground and seeing how you react to that. Unfortunately, everybody wants results immediately, don't they? So it's incredibly difficult to gauge results early on in regards to building lean mass, unless you've got access to a body composition machine. which I'm lucky enough to have one. We've bought one for the shop, and that's how I was measuring for competitions, which is fantastic. It's about 99% accurate to a DEXA scan. Fantastic way. And what I proved with that while prepping for a comp, now, as you know from the bodybuilding community, what we are told is when we are cutting, you cannot build lean mass. My lean mass increased ever so slightly, but I didn't lose any, which is absolutely goes against everything that we've been taught in regards to calories. And coming back to what you said earlier in regards to calories are so antiquated. It's not the calories that govern whether we gain or lose weight. The caloric model is highly flawed. It doesn't account for many things amongst insulin, the effect of insulin. It's the endocrine system that governs whether we gain or lose weight. The caloric model doesn't account for thermic effect of protein, ketogenesis, metabolic rate, the effect of lectins on insulin. So highly antiquated. And as you say, anyone within our space that works in calories anymore, I have no time for. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's just they are so far behind the times in regards to body composition, health and well-being. The caloric model, as you rightly say, is highly flawed. And I think there are better metrics to use if you want to track, that is. I think in your space for athletic performance, it's good to track. But I don't track anymore per se. The only thing that I measure is my body fat percentage on the in-body occasionally. But you can do this incredibly cheap. Now, one of the best tools that I found was a body fat percentage caliper, which you can buy for about £5 online. I didn't use this for the conversion into body fat. I just used it to measure the millimeter of my fat fold. And that's a fantastic gauge, because what I found, and it's probably similar to you, when you get to a certain point, your body fat percentage will come down incredibly, but the weight will stay. The last couple of pounds almost don't seem to shift yet. You know, you go from looking, you go to look like Skeletor. You know, those you get death face. You look incredibly lean, but the weight has barely changed on the scale. But that measure tape, although body fat calipers will show a difference. So they're a handy tool to have, incredibly cheap. I don't know about you, but I try not to go by the scale too much either. The scales, I think, don't give a full picture in regards to, you know, weight loss, fat percentage, muscle gain, etc. But yeah, love that. Well on board.
Yeah. Just very, very briefly, because I want to get through as much as I can. I like bioimpedance scales, not that accurate. Mine reads me at 19% body fat. I'm not 19% body fat. But it does provide me with a trend, so I can reliably find a trend line, so I can see what's happening. DEXA scan is, of course, much better metric. What I do like to use is before a competition is a body fat caliper, like you said, so you can get digital ones online for like £5-6, and you just measure the thickness of your abdomen, find an easy to access part of your body that you can just pinch. Okay, starting day 1, 10 millimeters. Week later, 9, 8, 7. There'll be 7, 7, 7, 6, 6. You know, so it'll go down very slowly. But the lowest you'll probably get it over your whole body is about 3 millimeters. That's what I could get it to. The back of the calf, the bicep, maybe 2 millimeters. But beyond that, you can't get much leaner.
Yeah, 0.5 I got to was my lowest, which was incredible. Crazy. In fact, it's not 0.5; it'd be 1, because they go up in sections of 2, don't they? On the non-digital. So that would be about 1 mil, which gave me a body fat percentage of about 2%, 2.5 kilograms of fat in my entire body, which isn't healthy. I'm not telling people to do that. It's not healthy to compete, but it is fit for purpose, isn't it? I didn't win on size. I won on condition. Nobody else could bring the condition that I did, and it's going to be the same story with you when you get on stage, because we have the ability to burn fat. Unlike anybody else on the planet, this is what we do. We're fat burners, and that's why we take that condition to stage.
We got a question from Andy there, by the way, which is intriguing for a lot of people. Jonathan, know your story. Doesn't lifting very heavy weights have a bad effect on your spine?
I do like this question a lot. This is a very, very fair question. So Stephen Thomas there and we did a video on this maybe 6 months ago. I've covered it. I kind of documented my spine fusion surgery before and after on my channel in a few different ways. And what I found is I've had to, over the years, change my training routine, revamp it. I'm at the point now where I don't do loaded squats at all. I don't do deadlifts, bent over rows, anything which loads the spine. What I found is I'm able to use more time and attention, use more specific exercises. It's less compound lifts. I can still lift very, very safely. I've got a few videos of me training on my channel, and you can watch me do my stuff. It's some older stuff, maybe 1, 2, 3 months old. And you'll see my form is immaculate. I can honestly say that. And if I had a client come to me and show me that video and say that was them, I'd say perfect. It really, really is top notch. And I think people think they apply good form, but they really don't. So form doesn't just mean in the gym that you're lifting something from A to B and you're doing it slowly. No, it means so much more than that. It means your instinctual thought and your intuition as you're lifting a weight, for example, in a shoulder press, is that the bar is actually going in one direction and you're using muscles to resist it. So it's not you're focusing moving your hand up, it's you're using your shoulder to bring your arm up. So it applies internally. So you can't see that in someone's training methodology, but what you'll find is the biggest bodybuilders, the ones with the most success, will often be the ones with the most mind-muscle activation. So that's how you'll see a pro bodybuilder on stage show their training videos. They'll be pushing it out, ripping it fast, but they have tremendous mind-muscle connection. That's how they get away with it. For people like me, I can't train like that anymore. I have to use less inertia, be a lot more careful. In terms of concentric and eccentric phase, so the lifting phase and lowering phase, I like to apply maybe 3 to 5 seconds up and maybe 3 to 6 seconds down for most things. That's a broad sort of range of what I'm doing. So yeah, limit inertia, safe form, safe exercises, be specific. And it does seem to work. I've gained 2 kilos of fat-free mass since my surgery, so figure.
That's brilliant, Jonathan. Great answer as well. And just to sort of broadening out and look on the flip, if you've had surgery and you do nothing and you just lay on the bed because you're too scared to do anything, that's actually going to be more deleterious, I promise you. You know, the old phrase about motion is lotion is really true. You do have to do it, but obviously with good form, understand your technique, and don't push yourself too hard where you're not doing the right exercise. Really, that's it. So Sandra's asking, in breaking through body composition plateaus, have you cycled the protein fat ratios to keep the body from acclimatizing?
Yes, I have done that. I'll try and give a very quick one. We don't get long, do we? If you're doing a long diet and you've got a lot of fat to cut off, I recommend to people that they have a diet break in between it. I'd say if you're doing any kind of diet phase, which is maybe more than 12, 14 weeks, have a break in the middle. It doesn't mean come off a diet, but it means maybe go to baseline, maybe what you started with, something like that. Maybe a 2-week phase. And that's if you're dieting for a long, long time. Now, what I like to do is sometimes have what we call in bodybuilding like a fat cycle or a macronutrient cycle. I think they call it carb cycling. So you'll just have maybe 2 days where you'll increase your food intake. That will help get your leptin signaling correct, as in your appetite will be lower, your metabolic rate will go higher, your thyroid output will go higher, your breathing, your performance, your ability to train, everything will go up basically. So then you'll be able to actually dig further into the fat loss phase. So yes, I do apply protein and fat cycling. Again, in terms of ratio, not a ratio thing for me. It's individual protein and fat grams as separate levers. I find that, you can't eat protein forever higher and higher to the point that you don't get some ill effect. Eventually something will happen. I've experimented up to 550 grams of protein a day for a period of, I believe it was 9 months. Every single day, around 550 grams. And that was my baseline average. That was because I was binge eating and I just liked food a lot. And I had a way of satiating myself. Little did I know, long term not ideal. The glycation from the excess carbohydrates, the glucose from gluconeogenesis, not ideal. It can distress the gut. The idea is to give your body exactly what it needs, no more, no less. You'll never be perfect, but the idea is to get as close as you can through different measurements that I mentioned earlier. Now, protein to fat ratios, grams. You can take the fat grams quite low, but the longer you do it, the more of a negative feedback response you'll get. So it's not something I aim to sort of continue. I think things like that should be used for no longer than maybe 2 to 3 days at a time. So you might do one maintenance sort of day in a week, maybe 2 or 3 moderate days, then 2 or 3 low days. They're not hard and fast rules. It's not like my prescription to someone, so don't try and follow this. But consult with me, Stephen, or Richard, and you'll find the right answer basically. But that's kind of the sort of thing I'd do. And how do I change that around training? We always have a protein requirement. We have a protein balance we're trying to keep to retain nitrogen within our muscles, so we can have that protein synthesis balance, basically keeping things going, basically, so you don't lose muscle. I like to keep protein quite consistent throughout the whole week, and as I get leaner, I might raise protein a little bit higher just to satiate myself a bit more, because protein is very satiating. You can almost, in effect, not entirely true, but you kind of can, get away with eating more and more protein to hit that hunger threshold, and still cut body fat. There's studies where people have eaten, I believe, 4.4 grams of protein per kilo of body weight and still lost body fat and retained some good lean mass. So you can do that, but it's not advised. The idea is to get exactly what you need and just stick it out. But like the keto pro said, if you're trying to get very lean, you will suffer. It will be hard. It'll be difficult when your body fat's like a millimeter or something. It'll be horrendous, and it will test you. It will test your mind. It's a battle of the mind, not the body, I think.
Brilliant, Jonathan. I can see Casey in the waiting room, but we're going to you've generated a lot of questions. So that's great. So can we do this one? If OMAD causes indigestion, constipation, would you suggest more small meals with mixed fat and protein, or one bigger protein meal and fat spread throughout the day?
Yeah. So it depends how much the person's eating for a start point. You need a reference value. If someone is eating 300 grams of protein and fat and they're doing OMAD, well, you're not going to feel very good, are you? So you need to know exactly what that person is doing. So I couldn't give out prescriptive advice for that one. If you're doing something sensible and saying you're maintaining your weight, you can split your meals up a little bit. Ideally, the goal isn't to have 10 feedings in a day. I think you can maximize muscle protein synthesis with about 4, maybe 5 meals, but it won't give you like much margin of gains in terms of muscle building if that's what you're trying to achieve. I mean, it's like fractions of percentages probably. The main thing is getting in the protein that you need in a given day. Now, if you've got indigestion, I'd recommend lowering the amount of protein and fat in each sitting, splitting it up a little bit. So first, obviously, do the minimal effective dose, so to speak. So if you're doing OMAD, do 2 MAD, test it out, give it a week, 3 MAD, 4 MAD, that sort of thing. Probably wouldn't go more than 4 MAD unless you're about my size, to be honest. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And I think as long as your protein is high enough in a given sitting, you shouldn't run into any issues. But the idea is you upregulate your gallbladder to synthesize enzymes and bile acid and stuff, which then goes to the liver, which then gets dealt with that way, or another way around. But yeah,
that's great. And this could be both of you actually, and then we get Casey in. Probably have to be a bit brief. Should carnivores train differently in the gym than people that eat carbs?
No. To keep it brief, no. What you may find is if you're initially transitioning, you may have a few days or weeks period where it will be tough. You might have electrolyte disturbance. You might not have the full oomph that you did in the gym. You might feel a bit dry. That's what's kind of word that we use in bodybuilding. Like you feel a bit dry. Give it a few weeks. You won't know if you're fat adapted until you get to the point where you've matched your previous lifts in the gym. So I'd say no, your training doesn't have to change, but you might notice that your intensity level may go down because you cannot give it that welly because you're not fat adapted. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Training stays the same. Coming back to a point you made earlier in regards to eccentric and concentric movements, I made a similar transition a while ago. I started to concentrate on eccentric movements over concentric. My timings were slightly different. It was more to 4 to 5 down and sort of 2 to 3 up. But again, I moved away from all the heavy compound lifts because of injury. So a similar story there in regards to the form and movements and eccentric, concentric movements. Training, same. Yeah, I've always I've lifted weights the same. What I have implemented is the amount of time that I spend in the gym. In the beginning, I was spending 2 to 3 hours. Education along the years has led me to believe that this is counterintuitive because of the elevation of cortisol. We live and learn. Rep ranges change. I found the sweet spot to be, around 12 sets in each movement, 45 minutes to an hour, and I found that I'd get all the best gains. You don't need to spend ridiculous amounts of hours in there. And yeah, agree with everything else that you just said. So yeah.
Beautiful.
So Jonathan's going to tag Casey Ruff, who's just entered the studio. Jonathan, do you know Casey?
I know Casey.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
High five. Which way?
Wait,
Try again.
Mirror reverse. I'm not very good at mirrors.
I trained chest today. My chest bit
Great
sore.
to see you guys.
That's great. Rich.
Oh man, what an enjoyable hour! That was incredible.